welcome to everybody to our session on being an active bystander or an upstander. My name's Lynn Hunt. I'm a trainer with the Supply Chain Sustainability School, and I'll be working with you on the webinar this morning. So have you ever been concerned about a situation at work and wanted to intervene, but you just didn't? So this webinar will look at why that happens. You know, it could be you might hear inappropriate comments or behaviour. It could be the way that somebody's being treated. You might suspect bullying or harassment. You know, there's lots of times when someone could say or do something to help others or to diffuse that situation or stand up for someone, but they just don't, for a variety of reasons. So being an active bystander means being aware of a situation and choosing to take action. Research shows that bystander intervention can be a really effective way of stopping a wide range of behaviours that otherwise could cause some kind of harm. So that's what we're going to be looking at in our introductory webinar this morning. So I'll put our materials up and we will get underway. Please use the session to self-reflect, be honest with yourself. It's a brief webinar, so we'll be interacting through chat box, Q&A and a poll during the session. So I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box. I'll be answering as many questions as we can. But, you know, if we don't get to it in this brief session, talk to us after the session, get in touch with us via the school. We're really happy to talk to you. We'll be asking for your feedback at the end, and you will get slides that we'll be using today. This is an introductory session. It's dipping the toe in the water. With that in mind, I'm sharing some resources with you at the end, should you wish to explore more. This is what we're going to be looking at. You know, have you ever been concerned about a situation? You've really wanted to intervene, but something has held you back. This webinar is going to look at why that happens, what it means to be an active bystander. And then we'll include some simple tools that we can all take, some simple actions that we can all take to support others without confrontation and contribute to an inclusive working environment. Bystander intervention is an important factor in enabling workplaces to combat discrimination, victimisation and harassment. It's a way of enabling workplaces and empowering everyone to speak up when they witness hurtful or inappropriate behaviour. And it's a great way, it helps businesses to create a culture of mutual respect and accountability. So we're going to look at these things. Why do we know we could and should speak up, but we just don't? Why is it so important to have active bystanders or upstanders? I'll probably be using those terms interchangeably. An active bystander, also referred to as an upstander. Why is it important to have these at work? How can we intervene safely and effectively? How can we speak up when we see or hear someone doing something inappropriate to a colleague, or indeed the same tools work for direct comments to us, and some practical tools to help. So let's start with a couple of definitions. A passive bystander or a bystander. These are people who choose for whatever reason to ignore the situation or to do nothing about it. On the other hand, an active bystander or an upstander, they are people who do something, who recognise a situation and who do something to try and improve the situation. So they'll in terms of they won't stand by and ignore the harm. They won't stand by and do nothing. Let's explore this a bit more. So if you've got a smartphone to hand, can you grab it now? If you haven't, I'll explain how else you can join in this activity. We're going to go to Menti, which is an online poll. If you've joined in our webinars before, you'll be familiar with this, but don't worry if you're not. If if you go into, you'll see a web address at the top of the slide there. If you go to www.menti.com in the browser on your phone, or alternatively, if you don't have a smartphone to hand, use another tab on the device you're watching this on. You'll just need to keep both tabs open and tab between the two. And you'll see a little box come up inviting you to enter a code. The code is also at the top of the slide, 62539329. That allows you to take part in the poll. So you'll use your phone to answer the questions, and you'll see one or two people are starting to do that now. And you'll see the answers coming up on the screen cumulatively. If I can just reassure you that everybody's answers are completely confidential. So I hope that allows you to feel safe to be completely frank with your answers. We just get a barometer of feeling. So the question there are, when others where you work see someone else having a rough time and it's seen, what's generally likely to happen? As with all the polls, I'm not going to say and the right answer is, because clearly it's not that kind of question, but it's good to see the variety of reaction to this. Okay, and I appreciate your answer depends on your role within the business, other people's role. Your answers will also depend very much, I guess, on the underlying culture of your business. But we see that the majority of people, of course, it's dependent on the situation, but you're confident that people would have their back if it was needed. It's interesting that a number of you feel that some parts of your business are more actively inclusive than others. That's not unusual. The cultures can be different. You can have very different cultures within a business, can't you? Depends on the leadership, the management very much within those sections of your business. And of course, depending on individuals around at the time, would depend on the confidence experience of the individual, of their relationship to the other people, of how safe they feel to intervene and how competent and qualified. And so, yeah, and there is the view that people would be expected to deal with it in their own way. Okay, interesting, thank you. Next question, or next point to consider. You've witnessed inappropriate behaviour from one colleague to another. How do you honestly respond? This question is a little bit different. It's asking you, because nothing's an absolute, because you might think, well, it depends on. So I'm asking you to grade these in most likely to least likely. So if you're most likely to, wade in and let the perpetrator know it's not okay, no question, you just know that's what you'd like, that would be your first option. You might think you're most likely to check in with the recipient and offer support, but you wouldn't approach the person saying or doing it direct. You might not get involved because it's not your business. Okay. And some of you might raise it with other people. And appreciate none of this is an absolute, hence it's a barometer of feeling at the time. But again, it's interesting to see the range of reaction. If we had time, which we don't, I would rerun this poll at the end of the webinar to see if anything's changed for you after the tools and techniques that we've discussed. Okay, interesting. But the first one, the one that's come up the most popular, checking in with the recipient and offering support, that is a form of active bystander intervention. So that's perfectly fine. Being an active bystander doesn't mean being a vigilante. It doesn't mean wading in, all guns blazing and, being a superhero. And sometimes that isn't the right thing to do. Sometimes it is. And raising it with somebody else. The fourth one, I tried to not get involved. It's not my business. Is the one that I wonder if you'll have a different view after the end of this webinar, or maybe you won't, but we'll see. But all of the top three are forms of bystander intervention, active bystander intervention. Okay, next question. Have you ever been a bystander? Have you ever walked by and let a situation go that you later wish that you'd challenged, supported? And it's, if I was actively answering this poll rather than running the webinar, I would definitely be in the yes box more than one. Just because I'm running this as a subject expert doesn't mean I don't sometimes do things I regret. Okay. And I honestly think this is the situation for most of us. Some of you feel that's not the case. That's genuinely great. But for most of us, at some times we will have been a bystander. And yeah, there's all sorts of reasons for that. And I'd welcome, as we go through this webinar, I'd welcome your comments to me and to each other in the chat. You know, that's the way that we can interact and share your feelings on what this is bringing out for you as we go through the webinar. Okay, next question. Don't worry, there's not thousands. If yes, and for most of us the answer was yes, what do you think prevented you from challenging that situation or behaviour? And this is a chance for you to free type a few words. Yeah, the fear factor is so real for a lot of us. And we have to feel safe. It might not be safe for us to challenge that person direct. Worried about the backlash, absolutely. Who the person was, that has an effect on it. Yeah, being afraid of losing a job. You see, this is all about organisational culture. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. Just not knowing what to do in the moment. I've been there. I thought panic, panic, panic. What do I do? Not wanting to seem difficult. Yeah, if it's a banter thing and you seem like the only one, you just sometimes don't want to do that. Maintaining your own safety is important. Lack of confidence. True, yeah, absolutely. Backlash, true, it shouldn't happen. Repercussions shouldn't happen. Seniority of the other person is very telling. Some people don't like confrontation. I don't like confrontation. Some of you put in who the person was. Perpetrator's general manner to many, yeah. Seniority of the person involved says a lot, doesn't it? Fear factor. Bullies are very good at getting the fear factor going. Yeah, not sure what to do. Lack of confidence. So lack of confidence is coming up a lot. This is why if you're a business owner or an influencer in your business, putting in some kind of training or scheme or encouraging people to be active bystanders gives them the permission and the confidence and allows it. Subconscious self-protection, sure, you need more support. Yeah, actually, if you feel you're out there all alone, that's a really lonely place to be and not necessarily a safe place to be. Not clear how it started. That's a really good point, actually. Sometimes it's not about wading in, because you might not have got the right picture or the whole picture. Sometimes it is about checking with the person after, saying, look, I don't want to be invasive, but are you okay? Was that all right? Change doesn't happen, not unless something like this can help to make it happen. Yeah. Being worried, yeah, unsure what to do, didn't want to make things worse. These are all absolutely valid points. And it's interesting, opening can of worms with grief, yeah. It's interesting that some of you fear, and some of you fear a backlash, some of you say it's to do with the seniority of people involved. That says a lot about organisational culture. And one of the issues about being an active bystander is it's much easier to do it within a supportive culture than to do it against, you know, if you're operating in a culture of fear, it's very difficult. Okay, thanks for that one. Next one. What's the effect of being a bystander, in your opinion? What are the potential consequences of people generally standing by and doing nothing? What do you feel are the consequences to the individual and to the business? So you can answer that in any way you see fit, whatever thoughts. Yeah, you do. Actually, that's such a good point. If you walk by, it's, again, I agree with you, it's seen as condoning the behaviour. Even if you don't, it's seen as condoning the behaviour. Yeah, it is due to lack of support. It might be becoming a business. Yeah, the potential consequences is nothing changes. It damages their confidence. Of course it does. Yeah, absolutely. You're supporting an unsupportive culture, aren't you? Even if you don't want to, you are being seen as agreeing with the behaviour, even if you don't. Yet nothing changes. It needs someone to make that change. It does lower your self-confidence. I know I've walked by and I felt really bad about myself. It reduces everyone's morale. Absolutely. You're completely on it. You've got this. You've nailed it. Yeah. Yeah. Everyone feels good. The culture's draining. It is. It allows poor behaviour, it condones the bully, and everyone's mental well-being suffers. Yeah, maybe not the bully, but yeah, absolutely. These are all absolutely sound reasons, and you do good job, Ms. Edmund. So if you're watching this as an individual and you think, actually, I could be an upstander, you know, it's a good thing. But if you're watching this as a business leader, these are the very tangible effects on your business. So if you are a leader that feels everyone should be a grown up and sort themselves out, these are the very real costs to your business. Interesting. And the last one for now, I think. Why do we need upstanders at work? Why do we need active bystanders at work? If you imagined yourself into a workplace, maybe you are in a workplace where you do have a culture of active bystanders, but if you imagine yourself into a workplace where you know people would have your back for the right reasons and vice versa, why do we need them? Yes, it does aid team cohesion, absolutely. It does make change happen, it increases confidence. It completely changes the culture. It's so powerful. It is support for those who can't speak up for themselves. Some people, you know, are just not that way inclined. We do spend a long time at work, and we do need to know people around us, support us. Yeah, it's all about fairness, inclusion, respect, positive cultures. Yeah, safe, happy place to be. We all want that, don't we? And actually, it does increase safety. If we're calm and relaxed and valued and working to our best ability, we're safer at work. It does bring the ethos to life. There's too many slogans on boardroom walls that are just that, aren't they? But it brings the values to life. Absolutely, good point. Challenges poor behaviour, increases confidence. Promote a better work culture through the ranks. That's really true. It's a great way of cascading this all up, down and across the business. Yeah, all of these are right. So I think we're all on the same page here, and thank you for taking part in that. All right, so we've done a bit of digging as to what we feel and why it's important. So let's just look at, kind of consolidate what you've already said, to be honest, but let's look at some of the consequences of people being bystanders. Sickness and absenteeism, you're right, the workplace becomes toxic, our mental health suffers. So we're either sick at work, we're absent, or it encourages presenteeism, we're there but we don't want to be there. Your turnover will increase, therefore your productivity suffers, the impact on well-being suffers, the effect on colleagues and people witnessing it suffers as well. You're right, the whole team culture suffers, because even if you're not the person that thinks, oh, I should say something, even if you're not the person on the receiving end, even if you're somebody, you know, from another team or another department, or even a client walking through, it has an adverse effect. And ultimately, of course, you know, it leads to bullying, harassment, inappropriate banter, all of those things, which again can ultimately lead to investigations. It can lead to people becoming an employer with a reputation where people don't want to work, which means we lose contracts. So there's all sorts of very tangible consequences to something that maybe feels on the face of it a little intangible. All right, so we've established the consequences. I'd like to turn now to something called the bystander effect, which explains a little bit about why we really feel we should and we really want to, but something holds us back. And it could be the things that you've said, like genuine fear of the individual, fear of the consequences, perceived or real. But it could be this. The bystander effect is something that's been explored for a long time now. And it's when the presence of others discourages an individual from intervening in a situation. So the greater the number of bystanders, the more likely it is the less likely it is for any one of them to provide help to that person. So if we see lots of other people being a bystander, it is more likely to influence us to do the same. And it is quite a powerful phenomenon in terms of how it works. Let me show you a little clip. I'm going to show you, it's a part of a clip actually, but I've included the link to the full video clip at the end of this session because I think you'll find it fascinating. I'm just showing you a snippet today. So let me share this with you.
Watch a pickpocket in action. The woman with the rucksack is his victim, and the man in the grey top on the left is the thief. Except they're both acting. In fact, everyone in the queue is with us, apart from the man in the blue shirt. As the thief moves in, will our bystander notice? He clearly has. What's more, he's seen that other people in the queue have noticed too. Now, what's he going to do about it? The answer is nothing. After all, no one else in the queue reacts, so why should he? Chances are, you wouldn't have done anything either. Whatever the man in the blue shirt thinks he's seen, he's influenced by the apathy of everyone else in the queue. In more serious situations, this could have disturbing consequences. Liverpool Street Station in London. A drunk lies on the pavement. In fact, he's our actor, Peter, but these passers-by aren't to know that. And since he looks the worse for wear, not critically ill, they ignore him. Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow. This time, we've dressed Peter as a respectable city gent. How long before he's rescued now that he looks the part?
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm all right, thanks.
6 seconds. She even calls him sir. And suddenly, everyone's a good Samaritan.
Do you suffer from epilepsy?
No.
While you're lying on the floor in the rain?
After a couple of minutes, even the police turn up.
I would just hate to be in his position of feeling ill and nobody helping and walking past, so I'd just like to check that he was okay.
I thought, well, it's wet, so he must really be ill because he's going to ruin his suit anyway.
Our actress Ruth takes Peter's place. She's not a drunk, but she's also not a city gent. How long before she gets help? Four minutes have passed, and 34 people have passed.
People don't really want to know that they just haven't got the time. Well, they have got the time, they just don't want to get involved.
But it's more complicated than that. If the street were deserted, a passerby would probably go to the rescue. But these strangers have silently formed a temporary group with a rule: don't help. This woman, for instance, has clearly spotted Ruth, but she conforms to the rule and does nothing.
You all right? You all right?
Watch what happens, though, when someone else helps.
You all right, you sure?
She suddenly finds herself in a different group with a new rule: to help.
She don't look well, does she?
You all right, yeah? You sure?
First I thought she was dead, then I sort of checked to see if she was breathing or not. And I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one had noticed her, because there was a bloke sat there just absorbed in reading a newspaper.
Okay, illuminating, isn't it? And there's a lot of things that we can take from that outside of what we're talking about today. You know, the reaction of the crowd to the drunk man versus the same man in a business suit says a lot about our unconscious bias. For example, you might feel that the non-reaction of the man with the pickpocket, where we started the clip, might have been due to concern about his own personal safety, and that could be true. You might have thought, actually, when the narrator said you would have done nothing too, you might have thought, well, that's rubbish, I would have done something. So there's lots that we can take from that clip outside of what we're talking about today. You know, things like stereotyping, unconscious bias, real or perceived risk in relation to our own personal safety in a potential emergency situation. And actually, the full clip that I'll send you the link to does go on to explore that in more detail. But what we can draw from this clip is in relation to work situations is this idea of diffusion of responsibility. Bystanders who witness discrimination, sexual harassment, or any kind of harassment, actually, bullying, inappropriate banter, coercion in the workplace, can be supportive allies for colleagues, but they don't always know how to respond in the moment. Furthermore, they might not respond thinking someone else will do something. And this is this idea of diffusion of responsibility. It was like you saw with the woman in the white anorak that you can see on the screen now. You saw her pause, you saw her look back, you saw her choose to do nothing, but then you saw her follow the guy that was in the, you know, the hard hat and that. and almost say, well, at first I thought she was dead, but yeah, you were still going to walk on by though, weren't you? So this does illustrate quite powerfully this idea of, you know, when people need to make a decision, when people need to act, but they wait for someone else to act instead. And the more people involved, the more likely it is that each person will do nothing, believing someone else in the group will probably respond before us. Okay, take a look at this next clip. There's no sound with it, so I'll talk you through the gist of it. And apologies, it's an old clip, so it's a bit woolly, but it's worth you seeing it. So let's take a look at this next one. Okay, so this was actually a social experiment, although nobody you'll see in the clip knew that it was. So these are participants that are coming in for, it was like a work responsibility thing. So they were filling in a pre-questionnaire for a work opportunity. First off, you see somebody in the room all on their own. They've noticed smoke seeping in from under the door. Within seconds, they go and investigate, and they get their bag and they take action for their own personal safety, which in this case is to leave and alert somebody to the fact that smoke is pouring in. Now watch the same situation where there's a group of people in the room. The woman you can see now with the denim jacket and the glasses, she is the only one that is not in on the experiment. She genuinely thinks that she is filling in this pre-application for a post. Everybody else in the room are actors and are in on the social experiment. Now, she's noticed the smoke, look. And she's sitting there wondering what to do. She takes a look at what others are doing, but they're doing nothing. They're calmly filling in the application. She's getting more and more agitated. She's scratching her head, she's looking around. She's not filling in the application. But look at how long it goes on for. She sat there and it's 5 minutes. It continues. And she's clearly getting more agitated. She's scratching her head. She's not filled in anything. 10 minutes she sits there in a situation that she clearly doesn't feel safe at. 20 minutes. Unbelievable, isn't it? And then you'll see they stop the experiment. And that is the power of this diffusion of responsibility. And it is quite a powerful thing, isn't it? There's a question, there's a point. It is also it is to do with bias and conscious choices people make. That's quite right. A comment in the chat, which I think was illustrated by the earlier clip I showed you, when the guy was, you know, a drunk and then he was dressed as a city gent, and then we saw the woman who wasn't drunk but wasn't dressed as a city gent. There is a lot of personal choice in this too. That's right. So I think you're right to point that out in the chat. The reason I'm showing you this diffusion responsibility doesn't excuse the fact that we're bystanders, but it demonstrates why, when we're pulled to help, we often don't. That's a good point you made, though. Okay, let's continue. So, why do we need bystanders? You know, these reasons. Not only do they help the targets of workplace injustice feel less alone, they also provide clear feedback to the person who caused harm in ways that minimize the defensiveness and also maximize the odds that the person doing it will make amends. Sometimes the person doing or saying whatever they're doing, particularly if it's we use this term banter, it's not, it's often bullying, but they might not intend any harm. They might be happily carrying on thinking they're hilarious, or thinking the person doesn't mind, because the person doesn't feel confident to let them know they're saying nothing. So they might think the person's okay with the name calling and the nicknames and so on. Giving clear feedback to them, they might think, oh my goodness, I never realized, it can stop that behavior. So it's everybody feels better about the workplace as a result. You're absolutely right. When you were doing the mentoring earlier, it creates and supports a more inclusive workplace. It actually demonstrates that as wherever we are in the organization, whatever level we are, we can stand up for what's right, with perhaps less risk than many may fear. Although I appreciate to some of you that might seem like a really glib statement, particularly if you are currently working in a difficult workplace culture. And I do appreciate that sometimes the culture needs to shift before you can safely become an active bystander. But those are the advantages. These are why we need active bystanders. And you'll see that there are different stages to this. So let me talk you through the 4 stages of being an active bystander. Oh, sorry, I missed a really important one actually there. If you are demonstrating that you're an upstander, it encourages other people. It's the opposite of that diffusion of responsibility. People see you doing it and they think, actually, that's great. I can do that. I can do that. And I guess to all of us, we can be that person that encourages others. But if you are a manager, a leader, you doing that in an appropriate way and actually demonstrating that you're open to feedback, to appropriate feedback yourself, can be a really powerful way to show everybody in the business that it's okay to do that. It's okay to support each other's. It's okay to have each other's backs in an appropriate way when needed. All right, so these are stages to being an active bystander, to being an upstander. You first of all notice the events or the behavior or what's happened. Now, this is about being alert. This is about being informed about what's inappropriate and noting the behavior to yourself. So there's a couple of issues here. If it's about, it might be about people being trained throughout the business in fairness, inclusion and respect, so that we can actually gauge when things are crossing the line and becoming inappropriate. And I appreciate to an extent that that's a subjective thing, but actually in terms of the important things, we should know what's right and wrong. And that is determined by our policies, our business values, and by training on fairness, inclusion and respect, so that everybody knows what they are and everybody knows what's expected of them to uphold them when they are at work. If you're a manager, supervisor, leader, it also requires you to have a bit of an open door policy. You need to be around there. You need to know what's going on in your business. Stage 2 is recognizing that it is a problem. It is an issue. And it's not presuming that the problem's been solved. It's not presuming that the person's not bothered about it. Even if the person that's the target isn't saying anything, if you clearly know it's not right, it's not right. Stage 3 is feeling empowered to take responsibility for doing it, for dealing with it. That's realizing that it can be your responsibility to be active in some way, even if you're not directly involved in that situation. And it's also about not assuming that somebody else will intervene, or because you're not the one causing the problem, it's not your responsibility to be part of the solution. And this sits more easily with some of us than others. It actually, this idea about being an upstander, it extends into private life as well as at work. It's about knowing what's right and doing the right thing when required. Stage 4 is possessing the necessary skills to act. And a number of you in the Menti we did earlier on said, but I just wouldn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do at the time. And I've been in that situation as well. And it can be difficult, and you panic and you think, well, I could make it worse. Maybe they wouldn't want me to. I don't know what I should be doing. Should I be talking to them? Should I be doing this? And that is an informational training need, isn't it? So if you are the person in the business that can influence that, and you think, actually, this would be a good idea in my business, but I can see that people need something to enable it to happen, it's a training need, it's an informational need. If you're not a person that can influence that happen and you think it's a good idea, you can always show this webinar, it's being recorded, to somebody that can influence it, or you can speak to them about it. So there are a number of issues there before somebody wades in, and actually just wading in can be a risk to you and also to the other person if we're not doing it in the right way. There are a few organisational aspects to this as well. And you touched on it when you were doing the Menti poll earlier, that it is very much about existing organisational culture that will determine whether being an upstander in your organisation will happen at all. And if it does happen, will work, will produce positive consequences, will be done in the right way for the right reasons. And some of the things to consider about your organisational culture: are people generally, outside of this idea about being an upstander, being an active bystander, are people generally comfortable giving each other feedback and open to receiving it? Because if they are, they'll be used to this concept. They'll be, I wouldn't say comfortable, because if I've done or said something that's offended you and someone says, look, can I have a word? You know, the jokes that you're making in the meeting, they're really not okay. They're sexist. They did upset a number of people. I wasn't comfortable with it. I'm just having a friendly word with you so that you can think about it. Now, you're doing me a great favour. I'm not going to feel comfortable with that because you're telling me I've done something that's upset a lot of people. But if the culture's right, I'll be okay with the fact that you've given me that feedback. Once I've got over my embarrassment, I'll probably thank you for it. And I'll know that it won't mean that I'll be sidelined or demoted or fired or whatever the first time. If I keep doing it, then absolutely, we've got policies and processes in place for that. And if what I've done or said is bad enough, is so bad, then quite rightly, it would go down a more official route. But if people aren't comfortable saying to people what they need to say, and if people are really defensive or angry when they get that feedback, it's not going to work. There's some cultural work needed first. Do people, they might feel comfortable with the idea, but they haven't got a clue. We can't assume that everyone comes to work with all these work-based social skills. Can I give you a bit of feedback about your, you know, if we're not given the information or the training on how to do it appropriately at work, then we're less likely to do it. And if we're not given the permission that it's okay to do it at all, we won't do it. Are there risks as a result of the current organisational culture, real or perceived, to them, to people doing so? If there are real risks to organisational culture, if people risk their own either safety or continuity in terms of their career at work, that says a lot about the culture needing to change. If there are perceived risks that aren't there, about people thinking it's a risk to them or thinking it won't do their career any good if they intervene, then there's some image work that needs to be done in terms of getting the right messages out there. So those risks, real or imagined, need to be managed. So there might be quite a lot of work on organisational culture that needs to go on either before or alongside the idea of us being an active bystander. The idea about being an active bystander also needs to be introduced so people understand what the role really is. It doesn't give people personal power to lambast everybody with everything they don't like at any given stage. It doesn't give any employee the power to tell any manager that they're rubbish and that they don't know how to manage just because they've asked that employee to do something that employee didn't like, you know. So there has to be parameters set. This has to be done in an appropriate way. People have to understand what being an upstander really means. Active bystanders and microaggressions is a good point, and we'll come to that in a second. It was a question in the Q&A. So to make an active bystander culture and behaviours work in your organisation, there will need to be training. In addition to, so once you've considered the culture, that's the first thing. But after that, or as well as that, you will need to train people. People need to know what being an active bystander is and what it isn't. And then you need to give people tools and techniques to enable them to do that. And I'm going to share some of those with you in a second. As well as that, it would be a good idea to manage the situations and monitor the impacts, because if you feel that you've got lots of complaints, you've got quite a lot of people not happy at work, you feel there's a culture of fear, but you can't really put your finger on it, be quite a good idea to maybe monitor the impact before and after. So you could think about an employee survey or asking employees, or an employee questionnaire of some sort, saying, what do you feel about workplace culture? Do you feel, if you're having a rough time at work, do you feel supported? Do you feel okay to give feedback? Do you feel okay to receive it? Do you feel people have your back here? You know, it would be good to get some reaction before you put this in, and then to see what's changed afterwards. It is always a good idea with anything to do with fairness, inclusion and respect, and this is no different, to have senior champions who are role models. And this isn't performative. This isn't, you know, doing a swanky video and saying, yes, I think everyone should become an active bystander. It's about walking the talk. It's about believing it. It's about demonstrating it yourself. So that would be an important thing too. Do continue. I'm looking out for questions. I'm looking out for your comments in the chat. I know this webinar, the format isn't as interactive as if we could all have a chat, but please do join in the chat, in the Q&A, and I will be keeping an eye on that. I would welcome your points of view and any questions that you have in this. All right, let's move on. For the rest of this session, I'm going to be sharing some tools and techniques with you that can be useful in being an upstander, in being an active bystander. So the first couple are taken from our Speaking Out webinar. There's a webinar that we do called Speaking Out, and there's one we call Empowering Staff to Have Difficult Conversations. So those are two resources that are similar but different to this that you might want to access. But the first, if you're going to challenge the person directly, or their behaviour directly, I should say, because it's not about you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. It's about challenging the behaviour. You know, the Rudyard Kipling poem, Who, What, Where, Why, Who? Those kind of questions. So what's made you think that? I just wondered, why have you done that? How do you think they're feeling right now? How would you feel if someone accused you of that, but in that way? How would you feel if you were called that in a group setting? It can be a real powerful way of letting that person think about it. You know, if they just haven't thought about what they've said, then they might think, well, actually, fair enough. How would you like it if that was, you know, if it's a bit of sexism, how would you like it if someone said that to your sister, your daughter, your wife, your partner? I wouldn't like it, would I? So that's a simple one. It can be a real powerful one too. Yeah, the who, what, where, why, who. The other tool that we share in those webinars that I've mentioned, the empowering people to have difficult conversations and the Speaking Out webinar. I apologise. I hear that the chat's disabled. I didn't realise that. Use the Q&A for you know, just so we can get through this. Use the Q&A as chat as well. My apologies. I didn't realise that the chat had been disabled, but use the Q&A as the chat, and I'll be keeping a look at that. Thank you for pointing that out. The second tool is AID, and this is a feedback tool that we share on both of those webinars. It's a real simple tool for giving and receiving effective feedback. There's a couple of advantages. Well, there's 3 advantages actually. If people don't know how to give feedback, they say, well, I don't really know how to do it. Then giving somebody a simple tool enables them to do that. It gives them the skills to do it. It also makes it easier for the person doing it, because if you share this as a tool in your business and you say, right, this is a simple tool we're sharing, you can share it in team meetings or toolbox talks. It also, by the fact that you're sharing it, it gives people permission to do it. Oh, actually, okay, you've given me this tool and you've given me permission to use it. And the third advantage is if you're on the receiving end, this feedback tool enables you to almost receive that feedback with good grace. It's not an accusation, it's not aggressive. It enables you to receive that feedback with good grace and to learn from it. So how it works is you acknowledge the situation factually with empathy. So Lynn, yesterday in the team meeting, you said this to me. It's factually, it's non-aggressive. And I'm going, yeah, that's right. Then you throw in the empathy. Look, I appreciate you might have just been having a laugh. I appreciate you meant no harm. Then it's the impact on you or the other person if you're doing it as an upstander. So, but actually, I felt quite offended by it, and so was really uncomfortable with it. And then the third bit that is so often missing when we try and give somebody feedback is what we'd like to change. What can they do instead? We say, oh, you really should do this. That's racist, that is, but we don't give them a solution. So the desired result is a solution. So it might be, so next time, can I suggest that you come and talk to me quietly at the end, or don't shout it out across the room, or next time, can I please ask you not to say those kind of jokes because they are deemed racist? Appreciate you didn't know that, but they are racist. You know, it can really, really work. It makes it easier for the person on the receiving end to receive it, but they're more likely to learn from it because you're explaining it and not accusing. An example. So I heard you use a negative term for people with mental health issues yesterday. You might have thought it was banter, or you might not realise that was the case. But actually, I felt offended by, I don't know if you know, but John's sister, she's got mental health issues. So it did really upset him quite a lot. I mean, you might have noticed he left the meeting early. So even if you didn't mean it, it is actually classed as discrimination. You might not have known that. So I did want to mention it to you so you could be a bit more careful about the words you use. It's not a script. I mean, if you're going to take these tools, take them and make them and use them your own. There's nothing worse than somebody reiterating, regurgitating verbatim something that's clearly come from a training course. It's a principle, it's a template, you know, but it does work well. And organisations that I've worked with have actually implemented this, say it does work well. And some of them have implemented their own versions of it, like a couple of them do this traffic light thing. So if it's a banter situation, they'll say to each other, oh, that was an amber one, that one, you need to rein it in. Or they'll go, oh, that was definitely a red light, that was. Or oh, red card, they use red card, you know, like from the football they use, that was a yellow card, that was a red card. So organisations I've worked with say that this does work. Okay, so that's the first couple of tools I'm sharing with you. The chat's been enabled, by the way, so I'm looking at chat and Q&A as well. But please do, you know, welcome you to join in as much as you wish. So those are the first 2 tools. Another one that I need to share with you that would be totally remiss of me not to share with you on a session about being a bystander is a very well-known model, and it's the 4 Ds of bystander intervention. This was introduced initially when it was used for something you might see, stalking situations, potential domestic abuse situations. So it was developed outside of a work environment, or you see a very aggressive situation building up, maybe on a train or something like that. However, you know, aggressive situations do build up in the workplace, don't they? So I think it's important to share this with you. It's 4 ways of intervening. So the 4 Ds, the direct action. This is where you call out the negative behaviour, you tell the person to stop, or you ask the victim if they're okay. You're polite, you don't aggravate the situation, you remain calm, you state why something's offended you, you stick to exactly what's happened, and you don't deviate. So the AID model would be a great way of direct action. That's how it would fit in with this. Distracting, so interrupting, starting a conversation with the perpetrator to allow the target to move away or get their friends to intervene, or you come up with an idea to get the victim out of the situation. You tell them they need to take a call, you tell them they need to leave the meeting to come out or something like that, any excuse to get them away, or you distract or redirect the situation. So you'll see that this one is an intervention in a situation that is beyond banter. Delegating is a bystander intervention if you are too embarrassed or too shy to speak up yourself, and that's okay. You know, it doesn't mean being an active bystander doesn't mean taking the whole world on your back individually. You get someone else to step in. Any decent business has a zero tolerance to bullying, harassment, anything like that. So other people will act. Delaying is a bystander intervention. If the situation is unsafe to challenge there and then, if you feel there's a threat of escalation, if you feel that there's a threat of violence, if you feel you're outnumbered, just walk away. Just walk away. Even though you feel, you know, you don't want to walk away, you need to be safe. Wait for the situation to pass and then call it out, or then raise it with somebody else, then go back and ask the victim they're okay, report it as soon as it's safe to do so. It's never too late to act, but sometimes you might need to delay in terms of your personal safety. Okay, there's a number of other strategies that might help. And these will help with a couple of points in the Q&A as well. All right, so there's a few here. Let's just pop them all up and I'll talk them through. So the idea, somebody put, what about when the person that you're challenging is actually arguing against your action as an upstander and saying, well, you're talking rubbish, you are, you know, it's my way is right. The social norms one can work. So you make the perpetrator feel that they're really out of sync with everyone else. So, you know, well, people just don't say that anymore. You know, most people I know, most people in the team don't think what you're saying is okay. Most people have said to me that they're fed up with your stupid nickname calling. They're fed up with your name calling. That if you feel safe to do it, making that person realise that they're out of sync with the norm can be quite a powerful way. Although I will say, in answer to the question that was in the Q&A, if the perpetrator is saying, you know, you're talking a load of rubbish, it might mean that you've done all you can do. You know, if you say to look, you do realise that what you're saying is racist, and they go, well, you might say that, but I'm perfectly comfortable with it. I think you should speak to people that way. Clearly, they are a direct racist. So actually, what needs to happen goes beyond you as an upstander. It may be you've done all you can do as an upstander. It may be then that you do need to say to somebody, actually, I need to report this. I'm not being a grass, but actually, this person's going around saying these things and thinks they're okay and has freely admitted they're going to carry on doing them. So the social norms one is a powerful one to help in that situation. But the point that was in the Q&A about if the person's challenging what you're saying anyway and say, well, I think what I'm saying is fine, then maybe you have done all you can do as an upstander and you need to refer it on. And that's where your more formal interventions come in. Somebody mentioned about microaggressions, and yeah, when you are responding to microaggressions, you can deal with them as well. Microaggressions work both ways. So somebody just like staring somebody down, somebody not giving anybody eye contact. Very often with the microaggressions, people very often, if they're doing microaggressions, they very often don't realise they're doing them. So if a friendly word is quite light to work, and you might say at the end of the meeting, I don't know if you realise, but did you realise you introduced everybody in the meeting except for Jan? You introduced all the guys, but you didn't introduce her at all. And when she did come in, you asked if she was going to make the tea or take the notes. You might say, I don't know if you realised, but you weren't looking at so-and-so, you were looking at the manager, but you weren't looking at anyone else in the meeting. And they just said to me afterwards that they felt excluded. And quite often, if people are doing microaggressions, they'll be really up for getting the feedback because they won't have known. But actually, the mention of microaggressions in the Q&A is an interesting one, because you can use them, if you like, back at them. So sometimes if somebody says something, giving them a silent stare or giving them body language that shows you really don't approve can be almost more powerful than the words themselves. Changing the focus to I is a useful one if you're a little bit worried about the aggression that's being focused on the other person. You know, you can say, well, it's not about her. I don't like them. Because the perpetrator might say, well, they were laughing, they weren't bothered. What are you sticking your big nose in for? You know, I made this joke. They didn't moan about it. No one else is moaning. You say, well, actually, I don't approve. I'm offended by this joke. If you have the confidence to do that, that can be a real powerful way. It's about me. I'm offended by that joke. And actually, turning to the law very briefly, legally, law on harassment says that we do have the right to be offended, if you like, when it's not directed at us. So we can hear something, we can see something, and we do have the right to be personally offended. Engaging empathy is a great one. I've mentioned the how one before, but almost coming at it as a friend. If you do have a good relationship with that person, look, I know you think you've been the life and soul of the party, but I really need to have a word with you, mate, on this. You know, people are stopping laughing. People are starting to say that you're being sexist. I honestly think we need to have a chat about this. And as your friend, I know you don't mean any harm, but you're causing a lot of upset here. You're going to end up in hot water. So all of these are ways that we can be an upstander, and they'll all be appropriate in different situations. The way that, how do you call out a sexist culture where it seemed to be okay, where it's confronted by a manager, when confronted by a manager, that it's okay if they know their audience? That comes out a lot. People say, look, I really know the team, they're all on board with this. I think that there's a few ways to deal with that. You can, if you've got good values in your organisation, you can say it's not about what the team think, it's against the values of our organisation, it's against fairness, inclusion and respect. And just because somebody's not laughing, we can't assume they're okay with it. You know, just because, in fact, the fact that you think you know the ground rules means that anybody that comes into this team, it means that anybody from another team, it means a client, we don't know the ground rules. We don't know that we're okay with it. We can't assume we're okay with it. But I think calling it out against the values, calling it out against the whole ethos of fairness, inclusion, respect, which is why we're all here in the first place, is powerful. And saying, actually, you think you know everyone's okay with it, but sometimes people don't speak up. They laugh through gritted teeth. You're quite a loud person. They haven't got the confidence. You know, calling it out, pointing it out to them that way. And of course, only intervening when it's safe to do so. Resources for the future. If you want to take this further, the full clip to that bystander effect video, because it's about 8 or 9 minutes long and it is quite fascinating. It goes into issues beyond, you know, the ones I've shown you. You can look at that on YouTube. There's loads of social experiments on the bystander impact. Just sort of do a bit of reading, because some of them have been criticised more recently as being staged. Well, they're all staged, aren't they? But the one I've shown you is a good place to start. And there's other stuff on there as well. There's loads of stuff on YouTube, good and bad. That bystander effect book is a good place to go if you want to read about it in more depth. It goes into the psychology, but in a way that, I mean, I'm a lay person, I'm not a psychologist. It goes into the psychology, so it's a meaty read, but it goes into it into a way that a lay person can easily understand. So that's a couple of resources for you there. I'm going to give the last brief word on this. This guy's the Chief Exec of Coventry City Council, and I'm going to give him the last word on it.
You witness something which clearly is unacceptable in whatever form, and if you don't intervene, you are complicit in that. And that's a hard message to give, but you are. Therefore, the empowerment to be able to intervene on a whole range, from maybe some minor disruption of a comment which is humorous or just means to just dispel it a bit and just make everyone feel a bit more comfortable, right the way through to using regulation and law and everything in between about how you might educate that particular individual or situation. Choose which one, but don't do nothing. Okay, so I think a powerful message to end. Don't do
nothing. So I guess my sort of closing point to you is, you know, what are we going to take from today? So I'd ask you to reflect on that at the end. The link to the recording is going to be shared as soon as it's ready, which is likely to be in the next week. The ideas about how to implement the AID and those ideas, that's explored more fully in the Speaking Out webinar and the Empowering Colleagues to Have Difficult Conversations webinar. They've both been recorded. They're both on the FIR website. So if you want more ideas on some of those two tools, take a look at those webinars. But if those don't answer your questions, get in touch with me via the school. And I'm really happy. I appreciate an hour isn't long. I'm really happy to continue the dialogue with you after the school have got my details. Okay, so it remains for me to you've seen that once. Please share your feedback when we go off the call at the end of this. We're bang on time. I'd like to thank you very much for your time and attention today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and please think about how you're going to be an upstander. Thank you, everyone. Bye.